My name is Reagan Lewis, 36 years old, living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I used to believe I was in a quiet, reliable marriage, until that one fateful afternoon, when everything collapsed in a way I could have never imagined. It was a Friday, around 4 p.m., and I was picking out a birthday gift for my niece at the mall when I ran into Harper, an old college friend I hadn't seen in years. She walked up, and her smile faded the moment our eyes met. "Reagan, are you okay?" she asked softly with a look of concern. Before I could answer, she said something that made the blood drain from my face. "I'm sorry if this is overstepping, but I just saw Ethan make a dinner reservation for 2 tonight at Savoy Prime. I thought he was out of town on business." The name of the restaurant hit like a blade to the chest. I heard every syllable, every skipped heartbeat, every chill crawling up my spine. I forced a smile. "You must have seen someone else." Harper looked me in the eye. I wish I had. But it was Ethan. He was holding his phone, confirming a table for 2, 8 p.m., and he wasn't alone. I froze. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I believed her too easily. All the signs came flooding back like puzzle pieces snapping into place. The late-night meetings, the unfamiliar cologne on his collar, the mornings he kissed me goodbye but couldn't meet my eyes. I had dismissed them all because I didn't want to be the suspicious wife. Now they were screaming in my face all at once. I drove home, hands still trembling even after I parked the car. It wasn't hard to confirm. I picked up my phone and called Savoy Prime with the calmest voice I could manage. "Hi there. I'd like to confirm a dinner reservation for tonight under the name Ethan Lewis at 8 o'clock. The host answered politely and without hesitation, "Yes, ma'am, table for 2 at 8 p.m., window seat." I nodded instinctively, though she couldn't see me. "No other requests, thank you." I hung up and stared at the phone like it had just handed me the life sentence of my marriage. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. I didn't cry. I had done everything right. I had trusted. I had given. Now it was time to prepare, not to beg, not to accuse, but to face the truth head-on. I chose a black silk dress I had never worn. It was a birthday gift to myself 2 years ago, one I had saved for a special occasion. Tonight I would make one. I did my hair, sharpened my eyeliner, painted my lips a deep red, not to seduce, but to remind myself that I was still me, even if my world had shifted beyond recognition. At 7:30 p.m., I parked across the street from Savoy Prime. The restaurant glowed with warm golden lights, its glass windows inviting curious glances from the sidewalk. I walked in, smiling at the host. "I'd like a table with a full view of the dining room if possible." He nodded respectfully and led me to a spot tucked behind a decorative column. From there I could see every table, every movement, every head tilt. No one could see me unless they were looking. I sat with a glass of water in hand, heart pounding steadily. At 8:02 p.m. the door opened. Ethan walked in. He adjusted his tie, smiling a bit too tightly. Then she appeared. Wavy blonde hair, tight red dress, like someone out of a fashion spread. I sat still, spine straight, lips pressed together. My hand rested on my purse, where a folded piece of paper waited. 15 words, written for the man who chose betrayal over honesty. I watched them from my seat as Ethan pulled out her chair and took the seat across from her, wearing the same gentle smile he once reserved for our anniversary dinners. They ordered red wine. She leaned in to whisper something that made him laugh, his head tilting forward. From where I sat, every gesture between them was living proof of what I already knew. She looked about 30. Light brown blonde hair, polished but not flashy. Her emerald green silk dress hugged her waist, silver heels gleaming, a pearl necklace resting just above her collarbone. The kind of woman Ethan once dismissed as too put together to feel real, and yet here he was, toasting with her like the world outside no longer mattered. I wasn't jealous. What I felt was a hollow ache in my chest, not from losing him, but from realizing how blindly I had loved him. I waved over the waiter, a young man with alert eyes and quiet understanding. When I pointed discreetly to Ethan's table, he nodded instantly. "I'd like to send a note to the man in the gray shirt and purple striped tie, table 6, I said softly, "just to him, and I'd like to see his reaction." He smiled knowingly. "Of course, ma'am." I pulled out a small notepad from my purse and wrote in firm, steady script, "Enjoy your dinner. I hope the food isn't as bland as the lie you told me this morning." 15 words. No accusation, no pleading. Just enough to rip off the perfect mask Ethan had spent months building. The waiter approached their table. I followed every step with my eyes, my heart drumming, not from fear, but from the certainty that this was the turning point. He placed the note quietly next to Ethan's wine glass, whispered something, then stepped away. I held my breath. Ethan frowned, picked up the note. His eyes moved across the words. In 3 seconds I watched his expression morph, confusion, then recognition, then pure fear. The wineglass slipped from his hand, spilling red across the tablecloth. The woman jerked back as it splashed onto her dress. "Ethan, what's going on?" she asked, clearly alarmed. He didn't answer. His eyes darted around the restaurant, wild like a man being hunted. I sat still. But the moment his gaze landed on me, I stood up. We locked eyes. Across the room he froze. She said his name again, reached for his shoulder, but he shrugged her off, eyes glued to me, as if he couldn't believe I was really there. I didn't walk over, I didn't scream, I didn't make a scene. I simply lifted my glass of water and tilted my head slightly, like a silent toast to their evening of betrayal. Then I turned and walked away under the soft lights of the restaurant, my heels echoing gently on the wooden floor. When the door closed behind me, the crisp autumn air brushed against my skin like a quiet reminder. I was still alive, still whole, and for the first time in years, I was the one steering the story. I didn't go home right after leaving Savoy Prime. I drove around the city for nearly an hour with no destination, no intention to stop. Streetlights smeared across my windshield like streaks of memories I hadn't fully let go of. Every time my phone lit up with Ethan's name, I ignored it. The first message came at 8:30 p.m. "Reagan, please let me explain, I'm begging you." Then the second. "It's just a misunderstanding. It's not what you think. Please, call me." I turned off the ringer. The rest came in waves. Long, short, desperate pleas mixed with weak excuses. "I love you, only you, she means nothing. I'll tell you everything. Don't give up on me. We can still fix this." I messed up. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was nearly 11 p.m. The house was quiet, the living room lights still on, as if he was waiting for me there. Or maybe just afraid to be in the dark. Ethan sat slumped on the couch, wrinkled shirt, hands in his hair like a kid caught cheating on a test. The moment the door opened, he looked up, eyes bloodshot from either lack of sleep or guilt. I stepped in, placed my purse on the chair, and spoke calmly. "I'm listening, go ahead." Ethan stood, shaky, like even his legs didn't trust him anymore. "Reagan, I never meant for it to go this far." I crossed my arms. "Great, then tell me, how far didn't it go?" He swallowed, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "Just a few months, 6 months. Her name is Clara. We worked together on a joint project." 6 months, I repeated, each word dropping like a stone. "While I was planning our 10-year anniversary, while I booked us a weekend in Asheville, while I stayed up writing that research paper, and you said, 'I'm heading to bed early to rest.' Was it those 6 months?" He stayed silent, then muttered, "I'm sorry." I smirked. "Don't apologize, keep going. I want to hear you peel back every last layer of the lie." Suddenly his tone shifted. "Reagan, you're always so busy. Your job always came first. Even when I needed you, you had meetings, deadlines, lectures. I felt alone." I let out a laugh, sharp enough to cut. "Did you just blame your cheating on the fact that I have a career?" "I was busy, yes, but I never forgot your dad's memorial. I made dinner 3 nights a week, and I always asked if you needed anything when you said you felt tired. Don't twist this." He looked away. "I didn't know it would get this bad." "You didn't know," I said through clenched teeth, "because you never wanted to know. You got used to me handling everything. You thought I'd always stay quiet, always forgive, always be your backdrop." Ethan sank back into the couch, hands gripping his head. I lost my way. Clara made me feel seen, but now I realize I threw away the most important thing. I sat down across from him, spine straight, voice steady. "Then let me ask one last thing. Do you love her?" He stared at me like that question shattered something. I don't know. I nodded slowly. That's enough of an answer. Throughout the entire conversation, I didn't cry, I didn't raise my voice. But something inside me broke. Not because of the affair, but because the man sitting across from me was no longer the person I once believed in. Ethan said something else under his breath, but I didn't catch it. I stood and walked toward the stairs. From now on, you sleep in the guest room. I don't want to see you in my space. As I turned and headed up, I heard a heavy exhale behind me. But I didn't stop. After that cold confrontation, Ethan stayed downstairs while I kept the upstairs as my own safe zone. We barely spoke for a week. But I didn't spiral into doubt or desperation the way he likely expected. I didn't fall apart. I started documenting. I created a separate folder on my laptop, set a new password, and began compiling every clue I had previously ignored. From strange charges on our joint account, dinners for two at Bramble Creek Hotel, spa bills in Asheville, to conference expenses that just so happened to match dates when Clara was mysteriously out of office. One night, when Ethan stepped out for a walk, or so he claimed, I entered his home office. He usually locked it like it held state secrets. But I knew his old password, his mother's name spelled backward. It still worked. The external hard drive was plugged into the side of his computer. I copied its contents to my own flash drive, then quietly opened folder after folder. Not all were about Clara, but one made me sit bolt upright. A folder labeled Skyfall Strategy. Inside were internal presentations, analysis documents, and saved emails detailing a planned acquisition of a fintech startup called Halden Core, where Clara currently served as Director of Project Development. A long thread of emails between Ethan and someone identified as Cash PS, clearly Clara Peterson, showed her sending Ethan sensitive data. Cash flow reports, next quarter expansion plans, and even key personnel files. Each document was labeled confidential, internal use only. I knew Ethan worked in asset management, but I never imagined he'd have the audacity to use insider information to direct investments. This was no longer just an affair, it was a serious securities violation. I printed the most critical files, backed up another copy to the cloud, and zipped them into a secure folder. I needed legal advice now. Someone I could trust. Someone who understood the law without asking too many questions. I called Ryan, my older brother, who worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) office in Raleigh. I need you to answer a few questions, hypothetically, I said as soon as he picked up. Another Reaganized hypothetical? Ryan's tone was half joking, but he quickly turned serious. Go ahead. Let's say, Person A is using non-public information from a senior employee at Company B to shape investment strategies for their own firm, I said slowly. Person B sent the data through personal email, clearly marked as internal. They've disclosed nothing to any regulatory body. This has been going on for several months. Would Person A be prosecutable under the law? There was a long pause on the other end. If what you're saying is true, not only possible, it's certain. That's insider trading. At the very least, they'd face civil penalties. At worst, criminal charges, loss of their license, possibly prison. Closed my eyes. Thanks, it's just an idea for a novel I'm writing. Ryan sighed. Reagan, if you're involved in something, follow protocol. Don't confront anyone directly, and remember, don't delete anything. I know. I hung up, my heart still cold. I stared out the office window, where the city looked quieter than usual at night. A part of me wanted to scream at Ethan, to slap the printouts down like an indictment, but I'd learned. Men like Ethan only fear what they can't control. I wouldn't give him the chance. I'd quietly flip every piece on the board. And when it came to checkmate, he'd have nowhere to run. After gathering enough evidence, I started crafting my own plan, not out of revenge, but to protect what was rightfully mine. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated, exploitative, and far deeper than just an affair. Step 1. Secure my finances. I went to the bank on Monday morning, right when it opened. I dressed sharply, brought printed account statements and documents proving my contribution. Good morning, Ms. Lewis, how can we help today? The banker smiled. I'd like to open a new account, I said calmly but firmly. In my name only, and I'd like to transfer my legally fair share from our joint account into this one. We spent over an hour combing through every transaction, every stream of income. In the end, I moved $187,000 into my new account, the amount I could reasonably verify as my own contribution, minus the questionable withdrawals Ethan had made in the last 6 months. I also met with an independent financial advisor Ryan had once recommended. She reviewed my entire portfolio, flagged exposure linked to Ethan, and helped me establish credit monitoring and protections in my name only. Don't let emotions stall you, she said as I was leaving. You're doing the right thing, not just for now, for your future. Step 2. Build legal leverage. I spent 3 straight nights organizing every document into categorized folders. Emails, screenshots, internal Haldencore files Ethan should never have had access to. I time-stamped each one to show that his behavior wasn't just unethical, it potentially broke federal law. I printed 2 full sets, one for home, one for the bank's safe deposit box. On the front of each binder I labeled them, contingency to be forwarded to SEC upon legal escalation. I also created a brand new email address with a separate password, never logged into from any shared devices. Each night while Ethan slept on the couch, I uploaded one file at a time so that if anything ever happened, one click would expose the full truth. Step 3. Face Clara. I didn't call, I didn't text. I chose the one thing Ethan never imagined I'd do, confront the woman he had used as leverage behind my back for half a year. I asked her to meet at a boutique coffee shop in downtown Durham, midday, in public. No room for theatrics. Clara arrived 15 minutes late. She wore a beige suit, carried an expensive purse, and walked in like she thought she was meeting her boyfriend's estranged wife. Defensive energy radiated with every step. Reagan. She paused, eyes flickering with uncertainty. I nodded. Sit. I'm not here to cause a scene. She sat across from me. I didn't know Ethan wasn't separated. He told me that we lived like roommates. I cut in. That our marriage was just a formality, that I was too busy, too cold, too distant. Clara bit her lip, didn't answer. I unlocked my phone and swiped through photos. Our 10th anniversary in Charleston. Christmas dinner with both families. A message Ethan sent me just 3 weeks ago. Thank you for always believing in me. She stayed quiet, her face draining color as she looked at the screen. He lied to both of us, I said, no longer angry, just clear. But here's the real issue. He's using the data you gave him to commit a federal crime. She looked up. What? I pulled out a printed email, placed it on the table. You sent him internal data from Haldencore's systems. Under federal law, that's insider collusion. You could lose your job. Or worse. Clara froze. After a long pause, she exhaled shakily, her hand trembling as she picked up the page. I didn't know it was this serious. He said it was just market research. I looked her dead in the eyes. You can choose to believe him, or you can choose the truth. Clara swallowed. If I cooperate, what will you do? I haven't decided yet, I said coldly, but I know you don't want to be the one who takes the fall for what he's orchestrating. Ban dik tieng an mai nuye kao, trindoi de do kyo kien te, vajoen kao truko. Friday, 8:45 a.m. I stood in front of the glass lobby of Northbridge Capital, where Ethan had served as vice president of strategy for the past 7 years. The 8-story, sleek glass building had once been his pride. Today, it would be the place where he'd face the consequences of his own arrogance. Ethan had no idea I was coming. He assumed I was at home or somewhere still reconsidering, as he'd been begging me to do over the past few days. But I had quietly emailed the chairman of the board the night before, attaching evidence and requesting a brief presentation at this morning's internal meeting. I walked in wearing a dark gray suit, every button fastened. The receptionist paused slightly as my name appeared on the guest list. She smiled. Good morning, Miss Lewis. They're meeting in room 2 on the 5th floor. I'll escort you. I nodded politely, eyes steady. I wasn't there to make noise. I was there to restore order. As the conference room door opened, all eyes turned toward me. Ethan was standing near the projector screen in the middle of a presentation about the Haldencore merger. He looked confident, animated. His eyes froze when they landed on me. Reagan, he barely whispered, stepping back like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't respond. I looked at Mr. Michael Grant, chairman of the board. He rose, gestured toward the podium, and said firmly, "We've agreed to let Ms. Lewis speak for a special reason. Please give her your attention." I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared on screen. Internal Risk Assessment, Halden Core Transaction. I began, "My name is Reagan Lewis, as an indirect shareholder through an affiliated fund, and someone with concrete evidence of internal misconduct. I am obligated to bring this to your attention." Slide 1. Screenshots of emails between Ethan and Clara Peterson. Subject line, "Do not share." Halden Core Internal. Timeline, content, IP traces. All clearly displayed. Murmurs filled the room. Ethan stammered, This is fake, I cut him off calmly. "You may respond after I'm finished." Slide 2. Hotel invoices, bank statements, transfer receipts. All showing Ethan had used company resources to fund unofficial meetings with Clara for the past 6 months. Slide 3. An audio recording of a conversation between Ethan and Clara, where he asked her to obtain cash flow reports ahead of public release. The room went dead silent. One board member leaned toward Mr. Grant, whispering something. Ethan tried to keep his composure, but I noticed his hand clenching tightly. I concluded, "I've submitted all of this to the SEC this morning at 8:10 a.m. I've worked with legal counsel to ensure every step has been transparent. This is not about vengeance. It's about protecting this company from a legally compromised deal." Mr. Grant rested his hands on the table and turned to Ethan. "Do you have a response, Ethan?" Ethan jumped up. I didn't know she recorded that. I didn't think this would go this far. You didn't think," I said evenly. "The issue is, you knew." A CFO flipped through a file, then stated, "I propose we suspend all Halden Core activities pending investigation." "I second that," someone else added. "We'll initiate an internal review and temporarily remove Ethan from any strategic decision-making," Mr. Grant declared. Ethan turned to me, eyes blazing. "How long have you been planning this? What more do you want, Reagan?" I calmly closed my laptop and gathered my papers. "I don't want anything. I just won't let you drag anyone else down with you." I walked out, leaving behind a stunned boardroom, a shaken Ethan, and a company just beginning to wake from its illusion of trust. 3 days after that fateful meeting, Ethan was officially suspended. An internal memo went out to all employees stating, "Mr. Ethan Lewis will temporarily step away from all executive duties while the company investigates allegations related to ethical conduct and internal security." The wording was diplomatic, but everyone understood. It was the company's way of removing him from the very seat he once held so proudly. I didn't feel happy, but I did feel relieved. A few days later, the SEC launched a preliminary investigation. Several emails, financial records, and communication logs between Ethan and Clara were extracted. I knew because the person contacting me from the SEC was a former colleague of my brother. They didn't say much, but the precision of their questions told me. Ethan had no way out. He packed up and left our home on Sunday afternoon, silent almost the entire time. As he folded his last shirt into the suitcase, he looked at me, eyes bloodshot. I was wrong. I didn't nod. I didn't shake my head. I simply replied, "I know." A few days later, I filed for divorce. I didn't ask for anything unreasonable. The filing stated clearly I would keep the assets I rightfully contributed to, the indirect shares in Northbridge through my independent investment fund, and the small apartment I'd put a deposit on in South End, Charlotte. Surprisingly, Ethan didn't object. He signed during the very first meeting with the attorney, maybe because he knew he was in deep trouble, or maybe because he understood. This time, I wouldn't bend. I moved into the new apartment 2 weeks later. It was on the 6th floor of a small building with a balcony overlooking the greenery. Not large, not fancy, but peaceful, and entirely mine. I placed my desk by the window, bought a new easel, and set up a blank canvas, waiting for its first stroke after 8 years. On my first day in front of it, I painted nothing specific, just blended tones, cool grays, muted browns, a hint of amber. I simply let myself breathe. During the day, I began taking on corporate ethics consulting projects, mostly through referrals from old friends and Charlotte's financial network. No one asked about Ethan, though I knew they'd heard. The news spread faster than I expected, but this time I didn't run from it. I let the past stay where it belonged. Behind me. Friday afternoon, while preparing materials for a conference, I received an email from Northbridge's HR department. The message was brief. Dear Ms. Reagan Lewis, we hereby confirm that you are a legal shareholder holding 2.6% of the company's equity through Investment Fund X. While the board of directors oversees operations pending the appointment of a new CEO, we sincerely thank you for your cooperation and transparency during this time. I read the last line twice, then smiled softly. Not because I had won, but because, for the first time, everything felt like it was finally in its rightful place. On another afternoon, while making coffee, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated a few seconds before picking up. The voice was strangely familiar. Clara? Reagan, I'm not calling to apologize, I just wanted to let you know. I've submitted a personal disclosure to the SEC. I'll cooperate fully. I said nothing. She continued, her voice slower now. I've also resigned. I don't want to remain in an environment I helped compromise. May you find yourself again, I replied, neither bitter nor conciliatory. The call ended, but I knew one thing. The storm had passed. And I was still here, whole. 6 months after the pivotal meeting. Charlotte in early fall shimmered with soft orange hues. The sunlight was just warm enough for me to open the balcony doors, set up a fabric chair, a hot cup of tea, and my laptop on a small wooden table. I had just completed an ethics consulting report for a young startup, a team full of ideals, still believing that transparency could survive in the world of business. Working with them made me realize I wasn't grieving anymore, I was simply stepping into a new role. Occasionally, my phone would receive messages from an unnamed number. I knew it was Clara. She'd send short updates about her cooperation with the SEC, sometimes just a line, "Thank you for helping me see it sooner." We never called each other friends, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. Like two people who once stood in the same collapsing room, each finding their own way out. I no longer thought much about Ethan. News about him had grown sparse. According to Ryan, the investigation was still ongoing. Ethan had been barred from working in finance for 3 years, and fined enough to force him to sell nearly all his remaining shares. I wasn't happy about that, but I wasn't sad either. I just felt lighter, as if an old hollow part of me had crumbled to make space for something else, steadier, more real. One afternoon, after closing my laptop, I pulled out a sheet of paper from my desk drawer. The kind I used for handwritten notes back when I did research. Slightly textured, creamy in color, perfect for blue ink to glide soft and true. And I began to write. Dear Ethan, it's been months since that night at Savoy Prime where you received the note I had sent through a server. 15 words. But that note unraveled 15 years I once believed was love. I used to wonder how someone who said I love you every morning could lie to me every night. Later I realized betrayal doesn't begin with cheating. It begins with silence, when one chooses to ignore the feelings of the other. You chose silence before I realized how far we were drifting. You chose pretense before I ever asked the question. I'm not writing this to blame you. I no longer want to be angry. That emotion only drags me back to a person I no longer belong to. I'm writing this letter as closure. Not for you, for me. Your betrayal, cruel as it was, forced me to confront a question I had long avoided. Who am I when I'm no longer Mrs. Ethan Lewis? Strangely, the answer didn't scare me. It freed me. I am someone rebuilding, piece by piece. I sleep in a small apartment where no one tells me to come home early. I wake up without emptiness when the chair across from me is unoccupied. I brew my own coffee, play my own music, and smile on my own. Ethan, I no longer love you. But I hold no regret. That note changed both of us. And if I had the choice, again I'd still write it. Still send it through the hands of a stranger to a man who once meant everything. Because through it, I found myself. Goodbye, Reagan. I folded the letter and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I would never send it. It wasn't for Ethan. It was for me. A final ritual to close the door behind me, not with tears, but with quiet. Outside, the sunlight tilted into early evening. I grabbed a brush, opened a jar of cobalt blue, and started a new painting. Not to remember what had been, but to tell a story I was now writing. With my own hands. And freedom. Reagan's story isn't just a journey through betrayal, it's proof that pain, when faced the right way, can become the foundation for rebirth. In the real world, many choose silence or surrender, but Reagan chose truth, independence, and self-respect. She didn't just rise, she moved forward with quiet strength, wise and unshaken, making others reflect on their own choices, a reminder that peace belongs to those who dare to let go of what no longer deserves them. What do you think of Reagan's choice? Would you have the courage to do the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and powerful family stories.